Good morning. This is Susanne Hill from the Citizen Bodycast, and we welcome you to a very cold day in January. And with us today, we have Peace Ike. Peace Ike is a community organizer in Philadelphia. She is also a physical therapist by trade. And also today we have Katrina, the co-founder of the Citizen Body. And as we know, the Citizen Body is where we are all working together, trying to find the things that unify us versus divide us. And today we welcome Peace to our program. Good morning. How you doing?
Morning. I'm doing good. Trying to stay warm in this chilly weather, but doing well.
Yeah, good deal. So I know that you are also the host of The Gathering Place, which is something that pre-COVID we found ourselves maybe going and having open mic, some different arts, and basically you're probably a better person to tell us about it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, The Gathering Place was started about 3 years ago, but I really founded it officially in 2018. And it is a community space that I created out of my home. Just kind of trying to find out how I can be a part of bringing people together for the purpose of unity. Very much, similar to what you guys are doing with the Citizen Body. So yeah, it started off as an arts endeavor for creatives, just to have a space to come and share their work. And it grew into, as things naturally kind of expand, it grew into just a place for people to come and talk and learn, get to know other people in a safe place, people who aren't like you, and have really important and healthy conversations and dialogue.
Okay. So did you start that in your house? Like you had people over to your house at first? Did you always just do it at home, or then did it grow to a point where you took it to, another place that could host all of you?
No, I do out of my home, and I'm grateful to say that I have a lot of space in the house. So we do very large events here, up to 100 folks per event. Yeah, we try to max it out, and we love it that way. But for the smaller, more intimate nights, like our dinner and discussion nights, or even our paint nights, we keep it very intimate. So it's usually about maybe 15 people maximum, just because we want people to have a chance to really get to know other people.
Yeah, that's exciting.
And
Yeah.
Probably a lot of
sorry.
cooking and prep work for that if you serve any meals.
Well, we do potlucks. We're big on potlucks because I don't like being in the kitchen. So you tell other people to bring the food and the problem is solved.
Yep. So today, and actually you're coming, we're 4 days out from the inauguration of a new president, and there was a poem that was read, and a lot of the press that I've been seeing lately has been very positive towards a young woman who read her poem. And right before that happened, we were talking about having you on the show, and you have a poem for us that you were going to share.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll share that with you. And John, it's good to see you. I know you've been to a couple of our events, so
yeah. I was going to say, before you launch into the poem, that you have to think about how committed someone is, who their actual house, their own home, which is very private for most people, is completely opened up to these events that Peace does. And I've been over there, and she's integrated this unity endeavor into her very home. So it's a pretty steep commitment, that.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking I couldn't have like more than 3 or 4 people in my house right now, because everything's crazy and a mess. And I was like, wow, 15 to even up to 100 people is pretty impressive. I don't think I could do it.
It does take quite a bit of energy, but thankfully I'm a pretty big extrovert and I love it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, actually, I am not a poet. Believe it or not, this is the first poem I think I've ever written outside of maybe projects I was given in elementary school, which I don't remember. So, but sometimes you think of ways to say what's on your heart, and it comes out, different. And this was how it came out. So I'll just read it and we can talk about it from there.
Awesome.
All right, it says resentment is an addictive drug. It hits your bloodstream with a potency so strong that if you find yourself unable to think straight. It feels good. After using for so long, reality becomes unbearable without it. You forget how to feel when it's not coursing through your veins. Moments of happiness and joy are unattainable. And so you become restless, longing for that familiar sensation that stirs up the only feeling that feels like real life anymore. You reach for the IV line conveniently flowing from your television, computer, or smartphone, and you stick that needle into your vein, a vein that now protrudes, blue and bright, strengthened by anger. Now you can feel again. A sudden rush of resentment comes flowing into your bloodstream as you remember why you're miserable. You remember who is to blame. You remember who has ruined your life. And you remember that you are justified. You dare not question the drug you are receiving. Is it pure? Is it authentic? That would ruin your high. And so you keep the needle in for hours until sleep takes over. Perhaps in the morning you'll go for a run, read a book, take your life back. But for now, this is the only feeling that feels like home.
There's home
Wow.
again, the home theme.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was
What
when I
made,
actually requested that piece for this show. And, we knew we were going to have peace on, but when I saw that poem, I thought that was the perfect beginning for this topic that we're doing today.
yeah. And what is it that we want to focus on with this topic? We're talking about elevation. Can you go into that a little bit more, John?
Yeah, I mean, we have principles at the citizen body that are in the philosophy that we're trying to help people converse around, because it just takes the conversation and rather than the vitriol we see and some of the negative emotions, we use our intellect and reasoning to start problem solving. Because when you're problem solving and you're actually in the active process of it, you're using your energy in a more organized and efficient way than when you're just plain emoting. It's sort of like a difference between a fire in the middle of your living room and having it in the fireplace. And Peace told me something about this poem that I'll let her explain that I think gets into this concept.
Yeah. Yeah, this poem was definitely a response to the times that we're currently living in. There's a lot of aggression, a lot of anger, and for some very legitimate reasons. But I think that it is so much easier to look without and point a finger than to look within and figure out what aspects of myself are contributing to how I'm feeling. And because, we're really a society that doesn't do that much anymore, we are a lot more vulnerable to outside influence and a lot more vulnerable to be manipulated by what we hear, what we read, what we see, which leads us more towards this group think mentality, which then can stir up all sorts of I don't want to say false feelings, but certainly exaggerated and heightened emotion that comes from a place of reactivity. And I think that that in itself is probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, problem that we're having with communication and relationship in today's day and age, especially with the political atmosphere that we're living in.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. And by the way, I really did enjoy the poem. I think one of the things that really kind of spoke to me when I was hearing it and reading it was you used the IV line of the different ways, the television as being what's feeding some of that resentment. Like, where are we getting it from? And, we're poking it into our own veins with what we consume in the media. And John, we've talked about this previously on previous body casts, where a lot of the information, you're trying to weed out, something that's good for you, but also what diet are you feeding yourself? Are we feeding ourselves that constant, that vitriol, that, the anger, whether, what side it's coming from, it doesn't matter. It's creating something in us that's not healthy and not good. And, yeah, we want to be informed. We want to know what's going on, but how do we weed out something that's harming us versus making us a more intelligent person, a more informed person that can make better decisions for ourselves?
Well, that's why we try to, the first thing is to step back and just, try to become aware, to calm down and just stop the emotion from flowing and start looking at it. We use alien perspective, like you're an alien looking down on yourself, even, instead of just how you feel. Because, one of the major concepts of the citizen body is like electricity, just, unharnessed to anything, is a lightning bolt. Lightning bolt is very destructive, but it discharges, it goes to, a lightning rod. That's kind of what our human energy is doing right now. It's just discharging. When you blame somebody, you're stopping productive work of human energy. You're discharging and you're done. You're no longer in problem solving mode. So elevation is taken from, a compulsive emotion, destructive type discharge of human energy, and putting it and harnessing it to something that produces something, either solves a problem or at least moves you more toward a solution. So it's teaching people, just to recognize the difference. I call it compulsive behavior, where it's feelings just driving you to do things, and conscious behavior, where your intellect and reasoning is actually driving it more and managing your feelings. Peace, I think you have a different way of referring to the same thing, but you did say it's kind of a theme in your poem too, right?
Yeah, definitely. This idea of self-reflection versus projection, which is that, we are going to have these feelings because we're human, and that's part of being a human. But what we do with them is where the dividing line is, the fork in the road. And so really it's always easier. The easier route is to look outward as to what's making your problems, your life, whatever, worse, rather than to do the work. And no one likes to do work. So it's no wonder that we're in the predicament that we're in.
Yeah.
The person we don't want to work on is ourselves, because that's the painful person. That's the hard work. It's easy to point the fingers and find, the fault in somebody else and put the blame on somebody else. But the really hard work is when you turn that point, whatever finger is pointing out, there's three more that are pointing towards you. I think that looked a little weird on the screen, but just remember, there's always three fingers that are pointing back to you.
Right, right.
Well, and that's the elevation thing. It's always harder to climb than it is to descend, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's, that's the whole process of, recognizing when that pain of climbing, that pain of doing the work is good, productive pain, which our society tends, and addictions tend to make you escape pain, right? Usually if you start, doing something that's, and it's not maybe like a clinical addiction, but just like anything, when you're eating a bag of Doritos, the entire bag, that you're probably doing something you shouldn't be doing, right? And that's, maybe you're not addicted, but you're acting more compulsively than consciously. Consciously, you probably shouldn't be doing this, right? But it takes less energy to do it. It takes more energy to do the constructive thing and the conscious thing. So that's why, just like elevation, even in the physical world, is harder work. The question is, are you doing the right amount of work and pain in balance with the right amount of pleasure? And I think our culture has gotten that calibration way out of whack. And if it's not Doritos, it could just be emoting when you talk to people. It feels good sometimes to vent. That's why when people lose their temper, it's like that discharge, like it's easy and it feels good. It's like a release. But the first step, I think, is recognize, and I think Peace's poem, using the analogy to like a needle and the IV, is sort of, it's a palliative, which is supposed to take away the pain,
Yeah, yeah.
you know?
Yeah, I mean, I would even add to that and say that, you were saying it's more work to stop and, work yourself out of these emotions than to just run to these things, which is absolutely true. And I would even say, like, I don't think people even know how to do that. I don't know if people have even been given the tools that they require. And when you don't have a filter for something, you kind of don't know where to start. And we're all a product of our family of origin, the parents that we had, the relationships that we've been in and out of, the abuse that we've experienced, real addiction. I mean, more serious addictions, like all of these things come together, and they shape who we become as adults, as we mature and as we age. And if you've never had practice, I guess, with being introspective and realizing what's happening on the inside, then you really don't even know where that point is where you have to stop and figure out, okay, is this me or is this somebody else? It's all jumbled together.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, now we just have created this society of, like you said, escapism, Netflix binging, overeating, and these things are the easy route, as you mentioned. And so,
All of which I do, by the way, just say.
I mean, me too. Who doesn't Netflix binge?
I'm aware that I shouldn't.
Yeah, aren't we all? Yeah, aren't we? But and that's a good point. Like, thankfully, we can say that. Thankfully, you and I can say we're aware that we shouldn't. And I think there's a subset of people who aren't even fully aware of what's going on within them. So.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we call this philosophic technology, because the tendency here then, and this is about, this takeaway for today is about the awareness of elevation and the difference between, say, what Peace calls self-reflection versus projection of your emotions, and what we would call compulsive behavior versus conscious behavior. Just being aware that the conscious behavior elevates you, and sometimes that more work pays off, is the first step. So what we're trying to do today is just get people to be aware, and then later on in our lessons and coursework, actually start giving them skills to practice to do that. And I do want to point out, when I say I do all that Netflix and other kind of addictive things that we do, some days I'm better than others. So what people tend to do is they make this dichotomy, like you could never touch Netflix and never touch, what was the other thing you said, Peace? It wasn't wine, it was something else.
I think I said harder addictions, but I might have mentioned,
You mentioned Doritos, John.
I did do Doritos.
Yeah,
yeah,
I think I said heavier addictions. Yeah.
But the point isn't that not only it's not to never have Netflix and never have Doritos, and that's what our old, I think, philosophic technology tended to do. Like, something's taboo, you should never ever touch it. It's more about taking 7 to 12 Doritos out on a plate and maybe enjoying them because you ate your fruits and vegetables and good healthy food too. It's more about maybe one Netflix movie a week than every night for 7 hours you wake up and it's like, are you still watching? And I've been there. I've done the bag of Doritos. I've done the Netflix, like waking up, like it seems like every night now all I do is come home and do Netflix. And then I've gotten myself out of it because I realized it was going down that bad path. It was, you know what I mean? And that's the awareness that then allows you to start moving in a better direction. So if we accomplish anything today, I think it's that people say, well, there is a difference and I do have it within my control to start altering that a little bit.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think a good like historical reference to that is, you know, what happened during Prohibition. You know, they tried to, you know, ban something that in moderation really isn't all that bad for us, but in the wrong hands with the wrong mindset, it's, you know, it can prove to be a pretty deadly combination for a person, whether, you know, it's, um, you know, just when it's misused, it's really bad, but it's something that most people can sit back and enjoy, but not everyone can do that. And
Mm.
again, none of us are addiction specialists. None of us have that background to really speak about what addiction is. But just from a, you know, layman's perspective, from the three of us, you know, I think we can all agree that, you know, I know that I learned addictive behavior. It was like, you didn't really learn about it as addiction. You learned somebody is just making a bad choice. You know, the kids who do drugs at school, well, they're making a bad choice. And then, but then you also, like, I had some experience with that, but it was, I was very sheltered from it when I was a child. You know, I had a grandfather who was a gambling addict, and I didn't really understand it until I got older that, you know, my father, he explained to me a lot of times, he's like, you know, one year we didn't have Christmas presents because he, you know, took his Christmas bonus and, you know, blew it on the way home, and, you know, came home on the train and we had nothing. And then there was this reference to a John Denver song, Please Daddy Don't Get Drunk This Christmas. And that always made me really cry because I remember that story, you know, from my dad. And like, I was like, why would he do that? And then later in later years, you start to understand that it's a behavior that's driving him. And then there's something in there that people really have a hard time changing within themselves, where, you know, we all kind of probably grow up with a very immature view. And I don't mean immature as childish, but maybe more childlike, that you just don't have that full grasp of it until you see somebody who's trying to recover and trying to pull themselves out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really, there's a lot more that goes into it than
Yeah.
the, oh, she just made a bad choice, or he, you know, he did that and it was stupid. And then you realize, wow, their brains are kind of hardwired and hooked to this. And, you know, that's an addiction. And then we're doing something that's maybe less hard, like technology is something that, you know, nobody who thought when the first, John, you and I were talking about, you know, our first computer class and, you know, the first computers, what they did for us. And it was like, who thought that this was going to be, end up being a harmful thing, but in the wrong hands with the wrong people, it, you know, and then what's our consumption of that?
Mm. Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that story about your grandfather.
But it was my grandfather, but my father was the one who
Grandfather.
was affected.
Yeah.
And it was funny, like every time, you know, if you know, we go down the shore and say, hey, let's take a trip to Atlantic City. And my father, no, don't want to go
Mm.
to Atlantic City. That's Sin City. That's, and
Mm.
I understood his perspective from that. But then in,
Mm.
you know, in years later, I can step back. I've been to Atlantic City a few times, and gambling is definitely not my thing. That experience from my dad is really kind of wired me into that. But I see other people enjoy it and be able to do it in moderation. And if they have I'm not going to judge somebody. You know, I always say to myself, I wipe too many rear ends for the money that I have to go and throw it into a slot machine. That's just
Right.
me. Other people, they have a different take on that. It's not right. It's not wrong. It's just what they choose to do.
Yeah. I think what that story, what that experience that you're sharing brings to light is something that I want to make sure that anyone watching this understands that we're having a sensitivity to, which is that, you know, it is very true that we can work on ourselves and, you know, get ourselves into better habits. I mean, that's what life is, a learning game of improving on our habits and our tendencies. But we also have to take into account that there is a whole subset of people who are facing really darker things. You know, they've tried their whole lives. That's why we have addicts. They've tried their whole lives to get clean. But the reason that doing A, B, C, D, and E hasn't worked is because there are really darker things that, again, have probably lingered from childhood experiences, you know, sexual abuse, like we don't know, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, in my experience with talking and counseling and coaching people, which has all been something that has kind of become a norm for me because I play this role in my community, it has really been eye-opening, because it's so easy for, like, you know, me, the three of us are pretty reasonable people, you know, educated and successful in our own right. It's very easy for us to say, you know, well, just, you know, we got to put these principles in place. But there's a group of people who it runs a lot deeper than that. And I think about, you know, even just experiences that maybe we can all relate to, and maybe at least in our teenage or early 20s years, but have been in, think of a relationship where you knew this person wasn't good for you, but, you know,
I have no idea what you're talking about.
you know, I've definitely been there, and thank God it hasn't been as deep and dark as some other people. But, you know, for whatever reason, you know, that thing fills a void that you are having that you haven't dealt with, whether it's poor self-esteem or whether it's just like this person makes you feel great and you don't feel so great about yourself when you're not with them. Like, there are all sorts of things that go into tapping into that emotional place within us. You know, I think about where we have just come out of and we are still in this whole pandemic situation. And I have to say, I have never seen so many depressed people in my life. And, you know, because when the world stops, and it's all coming full circle here as we talk about addiction, as we talk about projection, and, you know, when the world stops and you don't have the things filling your life that you typically have had, all the activities, all the friends, all of the restaurant dining, concerts, whatever it is, and you are forced to be by yourself, with yourself in your house, that's when you take inventory, whether you want to or not, because it's a natural response. Am I happy with the person I am? And you have no choice because you're stuck with yourself. We have very seldomly been stuck with ourselves in the 21st century. And so this is why we've seen the corrosion, I think, of society and the corrosion of our relationships and many people, their own personality or personhood. Because being faced with who they are and realizing that they are whatever it is, depressed, realizing that they are just very unhappy with who they are, dealing with these things, that's when it's like, okay, what do I do about this? And I want to, and then also want to touch on the fact, I think I'm dropping a lot here. I hope we're going to flesh it all out. But, oh gosh, I just lost it.
You said you have to face yourself, right? You have to face yourself.
Yeah, you have to face yourself, touch on the fact, am I happy with who I've become or am I not? Yeah, so I lost it, but I'm sure it'll come back.
And then also when you think about it that way, you know, you also say, okay, what am I going to do about it? And when we're in the pandemic, you know, you could say, all right, well, I'm a social person, like you refer to yourself as an extrovert. You know, what am I going to do about that? Well, I want to go out and I'll get back with my friends. Like, that's an answer, but not in the time of the pandemic. Your typical answers and the things that would work for you are not something that you can do right now. So now what?
Yeah. And the thing about those, and sorry, John, I'll let you step in, but to flesh that out even more, those things work for us, but are they actually getting at the reason why we feel like we need them? Because everything that we do in life, every relationship, every activity should actually add to the healthy core of who we are. Those things should flow out of a place of abundance, not out of a place of starvation. So if we feel like, oh, I can't be by myself right now, I have to see my friends, I'm dying. I get it. I've been there. Like, I'm an extrovert again, so I get it. But really, everything we do should be, man, like this, I want to share my experience with other people. I'm okay if I can't, because I'm healthy at the core of who I am, but those things make life more rich.
Yeah.
So.
And I want to say this all ties into, you talk about fleshing this out. We have a concept in philosophic technology, which is for people to just cue into that. All that's really saying is if you think about regular technology, we went from the horse and buggy to an automobile, to the Tesla. We have jets, spaceships, etc. People understand when you're talking about technology. Philosophic is, we went from beating each other over the head with a club to wars, and we still have wars. What we're trying to say is, we advanced a lot. We're still at the tail end of correcting all that, but you do see this advancement in human beings if you think of them as like their operating system is like their beliefs. So we have this concept called comfort configuration. The comfort configuration is everything you've experienced, like you were talking about peace in your life, your upbringing. Maybe it's your faith, maybe it's your philosophy, maybe it's a lack of faith. It's all this different combination of whether you believe different things about different religions, or whether you believe, my philosophy is, if you got them, smoke them. Like that's what you think your philosophy is, but it's whatever makes you comfortable, whatever set of beliefs, and however they're all configured. It's sort of like comfort zone, but comfort zone is just saying like in a specific topic, where's my comfort zone? Like, where's my comfort zone in playing baseball? Or where's my comfort zone? How good am I on the violin? I have a comfort zone. I can play in front of my relatives, but not in Carnegie Hall, right? Comfort configuration is the entire collection. So what happens is when you move, something challenges your comfort configuration, you feel uncomfortable. When you feel uncomfortable in some way, you tend to want to relieve that pain. So the thing is that's where a lot of times people want to escape. They had a really stressful day. They're depressed. A lot of people are really depressed in their work. They come home, they say Netflix and wine, and that's going to make me feel better. And again, we're not vilifying Netflix and we're not vilifying wine. I thought the prohibition example was excellent. So in moderation, but you have to just ask yourself, this is our takeaway. Am I doing the wine and the Netflix to escape pain, or am I doing it to reward myself for living well today in moderation? Do I feel balance? Am I enjoying the balance of my life, or am I just escaping pain? And the reason I think that ties into, and again, Sue, you said it, I think Peace, you said it, we're stressing, we're not, psychologists, we're not clinicians on addiction. But I think all of us can relate to addictive behaviors. I mean, I don't think there's an official disease for being addicted to technology yet, although there probably is. But 10 years ago, even, there was no social media. Like, people talk about an addiction. And some people probably just in the vernacular probably would describe themselves as being a little bit addicted. Like if they had to go without their device or something for a week or two, they might feel. The problem is you kind of need it to function in your enterprise in your life.
Yeah.
So it gets the line between, again, I say to my daughter sometimes, I'm picking up my phone here to show that I'm training her, she's 12 years old, on when she's staring into her phone too much, right? And then she's smart, she gets back at me when she sees me doing in my phone, right? But here's the difference. You could be writing a poem, on your phone, and it looks the same as somebody just scrolling through Instagram, looking at every other photo, just mindlessly. Like, yeah. So the one person might be escaping, and that their comfort configuration has them, they can't tend to what they want to do because it's too uncomfortable, because they're too stressed. And another person is actually creatively trying to do something very conscious on their phone. So we have to be careful that, like, all times we see anyone on their phone, we say they're a bad thing. It's a bad thing to be doing. You know what I mean?
And I know exactly what you mean. I do that all the time with my partner, Sean. He's on his phone a lot, and he really has to rely on it for his work.
Yes.
Like when I go to work, I punch in, I punch out, I come home, and when I'm home, I'm home. Yeah. My mind is home. Yeah. I'm worrying about things around here. But when he's off, he's never really off of work. But yeah. Yes, he's scrolling the Instagram. Yes, he's scrolling Facebook, and he's looking at all of those things too. And he's constantly looking at the stock market. And I always, and we were talking about this too a little bit before. I'll kind of try to hold myself to a standard. Like I use that little thing on the phone, that weekly screen time. And it says your weekly screen time is down 21% this week. Oh, I'm doing good, and I'm happy because I want to get my screen time down. I don't want that compulsive behavior, but I'm going to be the first to admit that, yes, I do it too. But I really try to look at it and keep it in check. And what me keeping it in check, my standard for me might be very different from the standard that somebody else holds. And I have to get used to the fact that he's okay with being on the screen all the time. And sometimes I'll look at him like, you're holding the baby, why aren't you be present with her? And he's like, I'm ordering food. I'm getting us our next meal.
Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't aware. To me, it looks like you're on Instagram. I can't tell. And
that's
what standard are we holding?
Well, that's the distinction, is there's times when you're consciously doing something on your phone that's productive. And there's times, it's like TV. There's times when you're watching a Nova program or a history program and you're really learning. And there's times when you're literally just flipping through channels like a vegetating, because you're just so stressed that you go into that mode.
And thousands of channels and nothing's on.
Right. And that's what we're trying to get people to take away today, is that when you're doing it consciously, you should feel the difference between, that self kind of reflection or elevation, where it's like you're sort of doing some light work, studying, learning, writing, ordering food even. It's that mindlessness when you're actually just in that escape kind of therapy. And that's sort of, to me, that's like the beginning of addiction. They don't all turn into full blown what we call addiction, like in the clinical sense, but addictions begin somewhere. You don't go from, being born to then at 18, you have a full blown gambling addiction the first time you walked in the casino. I mean, I guess you can, but it usually grows a little bit. Like you start somewhere and then it gets out of control. So I guess in my life, I always just looked at something as a potential threshold and backed away from it. Now, I'm not saying everyone can do that, but technology, I mean, I would say most people feel some level of sort of addiction to it. With the exception of those people that don't even have a phone and don't do social media at all. But most of us with phones, I mean, there's some level, I'm sure we're all trying to like get a little better at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you could also find that compulsive behavior, like we're talking about technology, and it's more of our behavior around how we handle the technology for ourselves. And is it becoming something that consumes my life, that I can't appreciate my 5-month-old baby in front of me because I need to see whose birthday it is on Facebook? Like when you like appreciate what's in front of you, and when is this something that enhances your quality of life? Like we all think of exercise, exercise is something that's really good for us, but that can also be a compulsive behavior to exercise, where if that's what consumes your life, is it still healthy for you?
When it begins controlling you is the key distinction. When you can't help it, that's why we say compulsive. And what Pisa's poem was saying is about, we're basically doing that same process of becoming compulsive in our emotions in relating to each other. And that's a problem.
Yeah. And it seems like the way that that people are relating nowadays is the title of the poem, which is resentment.
Yeah. And it's also, and Peace was touching on this in a different conversation, which was we're dehumanizing. And Peace is a musician and I'm a musician. And it's funny because I always say, if you dehumanize music, you dehumanize humans, because music is uniquely human. And it's one of those things that it's almost like there's a sacredness to it, because it can unite us. It can also divide us, but it's uniquely human. And when we only talk to each other on social media or texts or emails, I don't know if you guys have had this experience, but as we start to venture out again, as Corona, keeps waxing and waning, but in those, restaurants that are open for indoor, I don't know. It's almost like a little rush, like talking to human beings. I mean, we still have the masks on, so it's not quite the same. There's no hugging. I mean, we had pretty much cold turkey cutoff from handshaking. I haven't shaken someone's hand in a year. Hugging, just even touching, their shoulder or something. That's a huge change. And we were already dehumanizing on social media and stuff. So, think about that huge change. And then, like Peace was saying, like a lot of people seem depressed. Counselors are like overflowing with work. It's really out of control. So what we're trying to do is we believe a good philosophic system that is ready for the information age is the first line of defense, just like a good healthy body is a good first line of defense against, physical disease. Any kind of mental disease, we think a good philosophic system doesn't mean you're not going to you could be the healthiest person in the world and still get sick. But as we saw with COVID, or are still seeing with COVID, if you have pre-existing conditions, you're more susceptible, right? So in the mental world, we're saying if we can get individuals to have a stronger philosophical system, then we can get the culture to have a stronger resistance to being a vitriolic, divided, tribal kind of culture. That's our whole point. And I've seen this work in organizations, and my consulting work is what led to the citizen body and starting to gather people that saw the power of this. Because if it can work in an organization of 150 people, there's no reason it can't work with 1,500 and 15,000 and 1.5 million and on. Because it's just a question of exposing people to the ideas.
Yeah, I do. I think that there's a real place for behavior modification. And I think also that there are steps, to growing to the healthiest person that we can be. But it speaks to my soul because of the work I do as a physical therapist. My patients getting better relies on them doing the things I give them to do. And when I tell you that like 95% of them do not do their home exercise programs.
And they don't do it. Yep.
I'm ripping my hair out. So, I mean, you can see why I'm so passionate about not just this idea of behavior modification, because it's very, very important, but getting to the why. Like, why is this difficult for you? Why is this difficult for you? And when you dig deeper, you start to realize that some patients just don't even think they're worth it. They don't think that they're worth getting better. They're not happy or excited about their life. They hate their job. They don't enjoy what they're doing. A lot of them feel like they don't have a purpose in life. That's why we see suicide rates skyrocketing. So I guess I'll throw this back at you, but how can we address both the underlying issue as well as these principles once, to move ahead, which I think the root, just like a tree, if a root's unhealthy, you're going to grow unhealthy branches no matter what you put in place. So what do you guys think about that?
Yeah.
Well, what do you think when you say underlying principle? Are you talking specifically about your patients that don't do their homework?
Anybody who is struggling with a emotional or a deeper issue, which manifests in lack of motivation, poor life outlook, lack of a desire to want better or to be able to achieve better.
So I think what's important here is the reason, you're mentioning people who have to go and kind of on their own. I mean, you're helping them while you're with them as a physical therapist, but you don't go home with them and make sure they do their exercises, I guess is a better word than homework, right?
Yeah,
so
I call it homework though.
Okay, so you do call homework. So is it once a week that you see them?
It depends on the client, but usually I go to their house maybe twice a week. If the insurance lets me, that's a whole nother story. But
Okay, so here's what we're thinking, and this is the reason Citizen Body, why we're venturing out like this, because you've heard the thing about you're kind of a combination of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Well, if, that person is the only person in their circle of family and friends that has to do these exercises, there are certain people that are so committed and so disciplined that they can just do it. And it fits nicely in their comfort configuration because, I don't know, maybe they're really wanting to get back to health. They have a sense of pride about health and all that. But most people, like you say, I think both of you said, most people don't do it, right?
Yeah.
They just don't do
Probably
it.
not. I mean, it's hard. You don't want to judge somebody, but you also know, like, if you see somebody who's not getting better or not getting stronger, and you've given them the tools to do that, and then they're telling you that they're doing it, but you don't see the results, you kind of say to yourself, okay, well, is it that you're not doing the exercises, or is something kind of blocking you up? And I think even going back to the shows that Peace and I are enjoying at times, every time in both of those shows, there's a recipe for each episode, and you start to catch on after you watch a few of them. They start, with the 600-pound life, they all start out, getting out of bed, getting into the bathtub, and you see them trying to do their care routines and how much they're struggling. And then they start to tell you their history, and that history always has some sort of abuse, upbringing that maybe that we would consider undesirable. Something happened to that person, and a lot of times it usually does come down to abuse on both of those shows, because they are about addiction. There's some sort of an abuse, and then like we said, self-modification didn't work. They say, I tried this diet, I tried that, I tried to quit, I went to rehab, it didn't happen, and now I'm desperate, I've got to get myself together, and here I am at Dr. Now's doorstep, or here I am at the, like, all of the family and friends have gotten together and they're going to intervene. And I don't, like, everybody watches those shows to get something different out of it. I want to see them get back. I'm like, I want to see the battle. I want to see and I come from a place where I want them to get better, and I get upset, and like I get sad at the end. I'm like, oh, this is a fail. I'm like, that's an hour of my life I'm not getting back. I want to see them do well. And then I think we feel that way when we talk to, we see our patients, we get something that's like something of us invests in them, and you get to know them, and, whether, whatever it is that brought them or brought you to their doorstep, you want to see them get better. You want to see something good happen. And when it doesn't happen, it's like, okay, why? We have to figure it out.
It's a big W, capital W.
Yeah.
I think that, and Peace's original question about the underlying and, what can we do? And I can't relate from those TV shows, but I can relate from, or from being a physical therapist, but I can relate from being a teacher or a mentor, especially in my later work in consulting and doing leadership development. It's heartbreaking, whether it's a student or anyone you're trying to help. And I think all of us have this, and this is probably why we're gathered today, is anybody who wants to be a teacher or help as a nurse or a physical therapist or anything where you're truly helping people, it's sort of in your DNA, isn't it? Like, you get a sense of gratification out of that some people just could take it or leave it. But you feel this need, like this obligation almost, but this drive to just help people. And when you offer work and you give it all you got, and someone, it doesn't take with someone, or they squander it, or they just toss it aside, it's painful. For me, anyway, it always hurt. But if you create a community of more and more people that are all trying to work on themselves, then it becomes, and this is what I found in organizations, is it becomes like a peer pressure situation, where when you get to like 51%, and it sounds funny, like, how do you measure that? Well, it's just, we've gone into organizations where it's toxic and everyone's negative and they're backstabbing, talking about each other behind the back. They're not paid enough. They're overworked, underpaid. They hate the boss. Like, everything's just toxic, right? And then how do you go from that to where maybe you guys have had some experience where you've been in more positive type organizations where people are like, I really like it here and I'm learning a lot and I think I can grow here. It's more rare, but have you experienced that? like the difference?
Well, I mean, I think that definitely community it's so important. It's so important to have healthy accountability, and to have people holding your arms up when you're too weak to hold them up yourself, to have people walking the walk with you. And, again, that's one of the hardest things about where we are with Corona, because we just don't have that readily available to us. And I think specifically in the kind of work that I do now, especially now that I'm doing home physical therapy, that isn't really a tool that most of my patients have, where they can be in a group setting. Many of them are unemployed, many of them are on disability. So, there might be, I think maybe in a corporate setting, certainly that plays a role and can further advance someone's own levels of motivation. But sadly, and now we're learning in 2020 and 2021 that we can't rely on that. Not that it's not a great tool, it is. But unfortunately, we've got to have something within that motivates us. Because in essence, even though community is a great tool to help you along on your journey, um, it's it can be negative. And hear me out. It can be negative because, in a sense, it's like exchanging one group think for another. Oh, everybody's getting better. I'm gonna get better because this is what we're doing now. Well, what if everyone stops getting better? Are you gonna stop getting better? And that's why I say we can't rely on that. But I do agree, it's a really important tool.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, Piece. Like everything has a downside. But if we take that community and that community is committed to that elevation or that self-reflection, it's not even just the actual help, but it's just the peer pressure of seeing the examples of everyone else do it. So Citizen Body is trying to be, a community for everyone that wants to try, try to elevate in some way and try to elevate the conversations, try to elevate their own self-reflection versus projection, to try to get more conscious driven behavior than compulsive driven behavior. It's like so many people are unhappy in their work. So many people are unhappy in general, like you were saying, depressed. And it's kind of a sanctuary for everyone to come say, look, it's not, it's not your ethnicity, your religion, your politics, whatever. We've identified 8 things that every human being shares, no matter what is different about them, beliefs or otherwise. We can all gather on those things at a minimum. And then, one of them is seeking truth. And so it's like the active uncertainty that Sue referred to at one point is sort of accepting that we mostly don't know, but we can actually gather on searching. And as long as we open ourselves up to that, the community should be more than just like, you have to be this way, but we're all actually acknowledging that we don't have all the answers. We're just all trying to problem solve together. And it's not just a corporate, but it could be any kind of organization or even a band or, a sports team or any group of human beings. And what we kind of came up with is that if this works with 5 human beings and 50 human beings and 500 human beings, this is good stuff that we can just keep rolling out. When I did my work in politics, it wasn't any of that. And I can see exactly why we're getting the results we're getting. Politics was more played out more like the mafia, like King of the Hill, like who's going to be in charge. And that was the driving force in politics, is self-promotion. Like it's like the house of cards. The game is to get to be the most powerful person. That's it.
It's funny when you were bringing up my analogy that I was thinking of was when Peace was talking about, the sense of community, and sometimes it doesn't always work. The thing that came up into my mind was a sports team, and we're all in the Philadelphia area, so whether you like them or not, go Eagles. But I remember when we first, you have. They talk about like locker room culture, and that everybody is striving towards the same goal. That's a really easy example. And what happens when you have somebody who comes to the team who say, we need this superstar because we need to fill this spot, and this person's going to be perfect in there. And we've brought folks in like that, and then they've said, man, that person, the word that they use, they say he was a cancer in the locker room.
Mhm.
And, you know, but his goal is the same as the rest of the team's goal, which is, you know, we want to win a championship. We want to build something here. We want, you know, something that we're going to sustain. But then that one person, you know, and it was, you know, um, after maybe, you know, 6 or 8 games, and you saw that, you know, the rest of the team was failing, but maybe this one person was succeeding, and then everybody's failing. And you know, at the beginning of the season, get him in here, and by the end of the season, get him out of here. You know, we got to get rid of that person. We got to cut that cancer out. And, you know, what was it that we missed with that person? Because there was a reason that we wanted them there. They were a superstar. They were going to bring something to our community or our team that, and it's like, did we miss the mark? And what was my role in that? Because it's easy to point the finger and go, he was the cancer, he was the problem, he was this, but he was a superstar and there was something there. Was there something that I didn't do to help bring his talent out? Did I not support him in the way he needed to be supported? Because we can all sit there and say, oh yeah, we've been supportive of somebody in our lives, or even taken somebody that we know that thinks that they've been supportive in their life, and like, oh, that really wasn't supportive. It wasn't what I needed. And are we communicating our needs, and are we finding out what the needs are of others where we can help meet them there? So, you know, Peace, you and I talked about, you know, our home exercise programs that we gave him, and we know that if you do this, you're going to get better and this is going to help. But what, you know, did we miss the mark on something else that didn't help them? You know, I always think in my first experiences in therapy, you know, not understanding a certain a mechanism of injury, and the first patient that I encountered with that, and you know, you read things and you learn things, and then when it's in front of you and you don't know exactly what you're seeing, you're trying to put all the pieces of the puzzle together. And the thing that I had learned was anoxic brain injury, which is a really a tough one to understand. It presents itself so much differently. And, you know, I was working with a patient and I was trying to figure out, you know, like, he looks like he can't even see me, but he looks right at me. And it took me getting through that patient and then when I encountered my next one, who was another severe anoxic brain injury, the first thing in my head was, I got to figure out what they can and can't see. And
so deep. That's so good.
Yeah. I was just like, because like I had asked this person, I would say to him, I'd say, you know, I'm like, do you see me? Like I'd go like that. And I would get the same look that you're giving me right now. You know, nothing changed. And I was like, they can see, but they don't necessarily process their vision. Like what's in front of their eyes is not necessarily what's going to translate into their brain. And we all process.
Are you capturing like the depth of what you just said? I don't know. Are you getting that you just said two things about you talking about vision and perception, but that just translates into such a deeper concept?
Yeah. And like for me, it was a very visceral one to really try to understand, you know, what he saw. And, you know, like we would walk and, you know, like I could walk him and he, you know, we could navigate our way through the hallway, but he wouldn't, you know, like be able to process or react to an emotion or something else. And you talked about filter before, no filter, you know, on this person. It would, you know, would say, you know, like a lot of like extremely inappropriate things. They could be very hurtful, you know, he might say it to me, well, I'm not really hurt by it because, you know, I'm not family. You know, it can hurt you. It's at the core when you hear mean things, but then, you know, you'd hear him say something to the wife or to the children, and you'd be like, you know, and you know that there's no filter there, and that's, you know, that's a part of the disease. It's not a part of the person, and it's not how they feel. But when you hear that all the time, and then when we kind of bring that back into what we have nowadays, where we live in a very filter-less society, you know, it's a lot of the behavior that, you know, we wouldn't have tolerated that before. Well, our tolerance has kind of eroded, and we find that society is a lot more tolerant of behaviors that we wouldn't have tolerated years ago. And
Mhm.
it doesn't
Mm.
necessarily feel like it's a great thing.
Wow. That was all of that was just so mic drop.
Yeah, boom.
When you said, when you said I had to figure out what he could or could not see.
Yeah,
And because he couldn't see, he had no filter for what you were trying to show him. And I
yeah,
couldn't say it better. I could not say it better. I can't think of how many times in my experience as a therapist, I hit my max with this patient. I'm done. I'm frustrated. They're not getting it. I've tried a million different ways to
yeah,
teach them. And then one day we have a moment. They
yeah,
open up, they share something, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so not about your broken arm right now. This is so
yeah,
not about, you know, and I'll admit I'm kind of an unconventional physical therapist. I will go a whole session and we will just talk. And
yeah,
yes, I will bill that as therapy because he
yep.
needed that support that hour
You need
so
to
that
build
we can get him
rapport.
out of the rut, so that he can get out of that rut, so that we can get to these principles. And my most rewarding encounters with patients have been patients where we go, we talk, they open up, I open up, we have a moment of true transparency, and I build relationships with my patients that some people might call unprofessional, but then we get results because they are feeling heard, they are feeling seen, and
Yeah,
sometimes that veil that was covering their eyes and blindness where they couldn't figure out why can't I do better gets lifted, and now we're going somewhere.
yeah. And then
And you know,
sometimes even for us as clinicians, it's also about realizing that maybe it's not about us. Again, going back to brain injury, we've had a fella that was on our unit that, he would work with you and, you'd work together, and then all of a sudden he'd shut down and he was done. And then we'd say, okay, change up therapists. And, I'd feel bad. I'm like, what did I do wrong? Why couldn't I get him, to do these things this day? And then when I gave him over to somebody else, she got him to do the exact same things I would have asked him to do. But then guess what? 2 or 3 weeks later, he pulled the same thing with her. So what do? Put another face in front of him. Yep. It was a round robin, and it was for a couple of months. And then finally he landed on one person, and you're going to say, and then, there's that piece inside of you, the resentment piece that says, oh man, like she's the one who got him to discharge and go home and everything. And I put that work in the very beginning, and I tried so hard. What did she have that I didn't have? And then, having that alien perspective and being able to step back and really zoom back and look and say, it really wasn't something she had the right timing, because maybe if I'd been the person who would come in at the end, I
Yeah.
would be the one that everybody would go, well, what did she do differently? Why did she get it?
Not projecting. Yeah. Being
Yes.
confident and realizing, I am confident in what I can do. This is not about me. I'm not going to put this on anybody else, and that's really important to not be able to stop ourselves in that moment and not project how we're feeling on someone else and
Yeah.
celebrate.
Yeah, exactly.
and
Yeah.
what I hear both of listening to both of you guys, obviously not being a physical therapist, but to me, you're both trying to get to the real, like what's really the person seeing and what's really on their mind.
Mm,
Yeah.
So you're trying to get to a truth, right? And you're also trying to understand their perspective, right?
Yeah.
So in order to help them, you're trying to understand what's real, and you're trying to understand what's going on in their head. So
Yeah.
now imagine that if we're just constantly, we integrate that into our culture in a way where people learn this as a basic life skill, a basic philosophic skill, that when they engage in conversation, that's one of the goals of the conversation. Because our culture, in our comfort configuration of our culture, is win. Like, show you're right, they're wrong, like destroy them. Like all the videos that get all the views are like, this person destroys this person destroys that person. It because there's a boredom problem. It's exciting to see a street fight. You can't turn away. disagree with that, they're fighting. It's like that dichotomy or that paradox of like, this is a horrible thing, but I can't stop watching, right? The car crash thing. We don't want car crashes. We don't want fist fights, but we can't help but not turn away. Well, we have to first acknowledge that, okay, well, that not turning away compulsion in even a verbal fight is more exciting, isn't it? Like a debate. Like we've learned, we don't even think they should be called debates. We think it should be discovery dialogue. But we're sort of addicted in our comfort configurations to this drama. We're kind of like drama junkies. If you zoom back, take the alien perspective on our culture, what do we want when we're flipping? Like, oh, there's a street fight. Ooh, there's a meme. Ooh, man, that's really, and some of them make us mad, and some of us say, oh yeah, darn right. We either like affirm it emotionally, or we, react strongly against it, and it's drama. So like we're used to, if you mapped out our level of excitement, we're probably requiring in our comfort configuration like a lot of entertainment and a lot of drama. Versus like if you picture like a Buddhist monk or something, you don't picture them getting like super excited and all over the place, like either being angry people or being super excited from destroying people with their argument. And it doesn't mean we all need to become Buddhist monks. And I'm not even pushing Buddhism. I'm saying there's things from Buddhism that we can take to maybe start applying into some philosophic system that is compatible with faith, is compatible with other people, where we meet each other sort of like you're meeting your patients, and both of you are going to kind of work on each other. And that takes humility, right? Because like if I enter a conversation with somebody and I think I'm smart and they're stupid and I know everything and they're an idiot, where's that really going? Like I think I'm the teacher and they're the student. But if I go into a conversation saying every human being I can learn something from every human being, and I want to see what I can learn from this person, it's a whole different dynamic. And I want to grow a relationship, a trust, because if I grow a little trust with every person I interact with and a little bit of good feeling about humanity for their interaction with me, all we then need to do is go to the principle of iteration, which is what if everyone was doing the same thing? That's how you create, and that's the same way it worked in the organization. It's like one conversation at a time, as long as there was a plan to iterate this conversation among many people. So that's why we're trying to start, at the gathering place piece. This is what you're doing, is you're bringing people in and you're trying to find that. I've been to Peace's dinners there. And what do you call them again, Peace? I forget the dinners.
Dinner and discussion nights. Yeah.
Dinner and discussion. The first one I remember seeing was like, wow, this is great. I got to go there. I just hope I can shut up enough because I can go on. So Sue, I'll let you, manage me. But, there really was this kind of conversation. It starts with, you have to recognize in yourself whether you really have a sincere desire to learn, whether you really believe that you don't know everything. And then maybe you're ready for that conversation. But if you're going in like, I'm going to teach all these people, you're going in and then you're going to bat up against someone else just thinking they're going to teach you. It becomes a debate, and then it becomes winner loser. And then the next thing you know, it's like you've squandered an opportunity to build trust, to build understanding, to build reconciliation. I'm not saying every conversation you're going to solve all the world's problems. But what I am saying is, if every conversation is elevated as opposed to compulsive, because a fist fight is pretty compulsive, isn't it? There's no thinking going on. To me, a fist fight is the base level transaction of war. And that means that you failed in your philosophic technology to resolve whatever problem it is with reason and with spirituality. You have failed, and you've gone to the lowest base level of solving a problem, violence. And I think people have actually given up on that. But I'm just dumbfounded that we have this almost romantic admiration, a worship almost of technology and things like, phone and rockets and space travel and Teslas. I'm not against any of that stuff. But when I see the Apple store rising up in New York, I forget the exact location I saw, but I mean, I had this like dystopian view, like it's almost like a temple or something. Like it's like a low level of like worship for like, you know, this technology. Meanwhile, you know, so if you talk about doing something technology wise that's we can't currently do, people are fascinated and they love it. But if you talk about trying to improve human behavior or society or nature, it's remarkable how many people are like, that'll never happen. You're not going to change human nature. And I'm like, why? How can you be fascinated and romanticized by electronic technology and somehow hold in the same brain of yours that human beings will never get any better? I think that's our greatest frontier is you know, human behavior.
Yeah.
I just think it's, I mean, just think how much we have to, how much improvement. And I think it's fallen way behind, like MLK said, science has outrun spirituality. We have guided missiles and misguided men. And he said that 50, 60 years ago.
Yeah. And it's funny when you bring up Apple, I'm trying to remember the name of the book that I read, but one like the very beginning, and I'll get the name for you at some point, but the very it might even be right behind me, but the very beginning of this book, it talks about Apple and Steve Jobs, and you know he's you know, it's whatever year the iPad first came out, and he's about to do his presentation to, you know, the technology crowd and show them this device, and they said, you know, do you have one of those at home? And he said, oh God, no, I don't want my kids on that. And it's almost like, you know, with an addictive substance or a drug, you know, your dealers don't tap into their own supply. And it's that same concept of, you know, can I moderate something, you know, in myself that's a little, you know, that could be dangerous in the wrong hands.
Yeah, and it's not that it's bad per se. It's just I'm really fascinated by people's just, you know, unwavering like belief that technology will keep getting better. AI, we're going to have robots, they're going to surpass beings, and yet they're just nope, it's as good as it gets for human beings. Like we can't do any better. Like we're done. That's it. And then
I always think about that too. I'm like, where does it stop? You know, like right now, we have all the information you could want at your fingertips
yeah.
in the instant of seconds. You know, at what point do I not have to think for myself anymore? At what point am I, you know, am I not driving my car? I'm just getting on my magic carpet and going directly to a place instead of having to navigate traffic. But, you know, if I have a magic carpet, I'm probably going to bump into all the other people on the magic carpet. So that's probably not very safe either.
Yeah, but I think about how that affects conversations. Like if your imagination is done, human nature is fixed. There's nothing else to discover, or you know, no more truths to find. We've got it all.
Yeah.
Just think of how that affects your conversations. Like it'd be like if we felt like back when we invented the wheel, there's nothing else to learn. We'll never fly. I can't imagine flying. I can't imagine buildings. And yet for some reason, and that's why I call it a comfort configuration, because I literally think that over the years, all the plays, all the stuff that's been written, it's failed to keep our imagination, you know, from getting burnt out, that we can't do better as human beings. I mean, I feel a little bit like an oddball with this, but it's like, to me, it's abundantly clear that we've got so much potential with what we do with human energy. That's why we call it philosophic technology. You know, it's like we can do better with behavior, thinking, interacting, uniting, you know, and where that got, you know, relegated to like, you know, insanity. I wonder where that fork happened in the road, that people just stop believing that we can do better, you know?
Yeah. It seems like the more evolved we get, the more, I don't know, devolved that we get, you know.
Yeah.
Now we have bigger problems to tackle. Like, you know,
Yeah.
you think of like, you know, the knights in the medieval times, and, you know, like they're going to war and they're clashing with their swords and everything. And, you know, weapons are very immature and, you know, very blunt, and you can kill somebody. And, now we have like all these other things to navigate. Like now we have to navigate gun laws, where there were no gun laws then. You went out and you had a war. And what were they fighting about? It was territory and things. Like, it's all the same battle, but as we've evolved, we've just made that battle so much more complicated. And there's so many more things to think about. So we have more discussions. There's a lot more important things to take into consideration versus, I want my land to be 50 meters out more and I'm going to fight you for it, and now
but maybe we've overcomplicated it too. And just that's why we think if we can get people to gather and say, okay, look, we're leaving everything that separates us at the door, but these 8 things, we started out with 16 things that unite all human beings, regardless of anything about them, other than the fact that they're a human being. We've combined them into 8 to make it easier to remember. But we're actually in the process of, writing that. And these conversations actually we're having today with Peace, they shape kind of these principles and these rules we come up with to try to give people some simple guidelines that leave all learning open at all times, leave them open to exploring faiths, leave them open to exploring everything, just in a scientifically accurate way, that there's less closed-minded, damning of people that disagree, and more scientifically accurate unknown mixed into their, belief system, like about political and ideology, and just more accurate thinking, like you have more accurate devices. To me, it's really exciting because I feel like we're just getting into it. But I don't know. I mean, Peace, your gathering place, does this in a way, and I don't know. I'm curious what you think. Are you like kind of almost perplexed at why people think that like we can't do any better?
Yeah, I was going to chime in there. I should let you guys know I have 12% on my computer and my power cord's in the next room.
Okay.
So I'm more than willing to go grab the power cord and we can go longer, or if that's too disruptive, we can wrap up in the next 5 minutes. Probably it's all it's going to last.
Okay.
But I'll respond to that. And if you guys want to keep going, if you don't mind, I'll go grab the power cord.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I'm thinking as I listen to that last exchange for the last 5 minutes, 10 minutes that you guys have been having is that there's a theme for me that runs right through why we find ourselves in this predicament. That's the question, why do we feel human beings can't get any better? I don't necessarily feel that human beings can't get any better. And I'm with you. I think that once we give up on bettering ourselves, then we've really given up. And that's a really dismal place to be in. But I think the core that's tying all of this together, and let's realize again, is that, we've been here for how many centuries, and we are facing and having the very same problems, as you guys mentioned. It's still wars, still death and murder, and still, hatred and race wars and all of this stuff, racism. And it just hasn't gone anywhere. It's only changed in format. So maybe I'm more of a realist than most. But I think I'm a hopeful realist, if I put that in there, that we're missing something. And, so there's lots of theories on what that thing is. But what I will say is this: the thing that seems to be running, that's my power indicator. The thing that seems to be running as a theme is power hungry, the search for power. That search for power has been there from the very beginning and continues to be there, and it's probably gonna be there because we're hardwired. And I don't, it's an ego thing is what I'm trying to say.
You should definitely get your power cord, because
I was just going to say,
that's a major.
Speaking of power, if you want to grab your power cord now.
Good segue.
I just mentioned that for people who are watching and listening, that you are listening to the Citizen Body podcast, or as we call it, the Bodycast. And what the body cast does is tries to find a way to stabilize what's broken in a lot of ways. So, and we do that through discussion. And we're thrilled today to have Peace Ike with us, and just being able to talk about what's going on today. We're a few days out from the inauguration of a new president, and we're finding people. Some people are feeling some resentment. The people who feel that they have won. Sometimes, they're kind of rubbing it into the people who have lost, and the people who have lost are kind of, there might be some resentment in this whole unity and moving forward thing. And I was going to mention before, like the one thing that I've been enjoying the last few days, and trying to modify my media diet. I'm trying not to listen to the people who are feeling like they've lost, and then the people who feel like they've won. And the one thing that I'm enjoying the heck out of is the Bernie Sanders and the mittens meme. It's my
Yeah.
favorite.
Yeah. Well, it just goes to show you that. And I think that no matter what, the Amanda Gorman poem, and I know some people are unhappy just because of the whole thing. Like they can't accept anything, but it's a good mental exercise to say, just the ideas in that poem, and someone in their early 20s with the opportunity that actually crafted that, which is why we celebrate every week a featured artist, and poems like Peace had. That Amanda Gorman poem and the Bernie thing shows you little hints of things that we all can kind of unite on. Now, I realize not everybody likes Amanda or her poem, but I think those two things are some of the closest. The humor of the Bernie thing, it's not mean-spirited. He has a good attitude about it. He talked about it. It's all in good fun. The mittens, it's all pretty healthy for us. And the Amanda Gorman poem is also very healthy for us. But Peace brought up power, and now that she has her power, I have to tell you that in philosophical technology, the absolute foundational thing that we try to get people to understand is, for 100,000 years, depending upon who you talk to, 200,000 years of human history, 100,000, or even less, depending upon who you talk to. But whatever number you think it is, whether it's 6,000, 100,000, or 200,000, human beings have been struggling with this. And Peace brought up power, and I absolutely agree that it's fundamental. Every single human being understands power affects you more than probably anything else in your life. It always concentrates. People worry about communism, socialism, capitalism, fascism. You take any ism through history, whether it's a dynasty or what do they call the czar? I forget what they called, how they referred to the institution. But it's just power. I mean, a friend just visited Cuba, and supposedly Cuba's communist right now, but she said she couldn't believe they were so poor. The cars, it's hard to find a car that's less than 40 years old. I mean, they're riding around in like 1950s and 60s cars. It's insane. And then they have she went to a restaurant, and the toilet is like almost exposed. You have to bring a bucket of water to like put it into the toilet to like flush it. She's showing us these photos. I'm in a Spanish group trying to learn Spanish, and she's showing us her photos of Cuba. And she said, and then these other people live like royalty, like Bentleys, and like it's extreme. So I said, well, is that communism? She said, there's no communism. And she meant that that's not how communism is supposed to work, the way it's sold, right? So I stopped focusing on ism versus ism a long time ago and focused on power, because it's about who's in power, not as much the ism. I'm not saying the ism doesn't matter at all, but you can name any ism and you can see where it went very badly because power concentrated way too much in too few people who then abused that power. They enriched themselves to the detriment. And this is why we call the citizen body. What your body does is it naturally distributes power. There's some force, whether it's from within or from, without, that keeps it in homeostasis. Your blood pressure, your temperature, your pH, your triglycerides, your hormones. It's like, it's miraculous. Like you can't even believe sometimes the delicate balance, your body temperature. Um, these things are so delicate, but the body keeps it all in balance. But what we do as human beings, and what we're saying as the citizen body, is we think we can start finding a way to move toward a balance like that amongst all human beings by first being aware. But the power that happens in your body is your brain gets about 20% of the calories you consume pretty consistently. The rest of your body shares the other 80%, pretty nicely distributed, not by some external dictation, but just by the nature of you. When you get something like cancer, a few rogue cells start to get very powerful and start consuming, and just they don't cooperate anymore with the rest of the cells. And for their own power and advancement and growth, they basically get greedy. And that's kind of what you see happening in almost every ism in government in the world, right? So back to Pisa's point, it's about power and basically then accumulating and abusing power. What we're trying to do is show the people how they can actually control their own power better, so they don't become victimized or hoodwinked into relinquishing their power, so that the power stays naturally more distributed, not by a government divvying it out. Because once you give the government all that power, they've never divvied it out, and most people don't want that anyway. Like, human beings want to fulfill their own potential. You don't usually ask an 18-year-old, what's your dream? And they're like, I want to be dependent for every need on the government. Most people will dream of, being a musician, or being a sports person, or being a great teacher, or being a great doctor or lawyer. They have dreams and ambitions. That's the fuel that keeps us growing and advances us. So we're talking about the power, like the human body distributes it really well without a dictator. We're talking about us learning as citizens how to use our money, our votes, our attention, and our admiration all better to keep that power distributed among us in the community, that we don't fall into this. What we kind of have now is an oligarchy, a concentration of power at the top. Okay, that's my diatribe. Sorry, but I had to. It's such a key concept.
Yeah. Peace. So with the gathering place, we've talked a little bit about your dinner and discussions, dine and discussion. What are some of the topics that you guys have covered for discussions?
Anything from A to Z. Yeah. Politics, racism, relationships, religion, philosophy. Yeah, the more controversial, the better.
What's been your take on, some of the discussions I can imagine might get a little heat? Do they get heated at all?
Thankfully, really, the audience that those nights attract are typically already practiced and having good dialogue.
Okay.
There are some people who just, probably are not in a healthy enough place to be able to partake in a night like that, and that's completely understandable. But I'm thankful to say we haven't had that. I would say maybe once or twice there's been an individual who has clearly showed up with an intention behind their presence, which is to get everyone to believe the way they do, and it's quite obvious. And so I might maybe have to mediate a little bit more on those nights, but for the most part, it's a very healthy dialogue.
Yeah. Does that, just out of curiosity, does that person ever recognize that they're doing that?
Typically not.
Yeah. So that kind of goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning of, there's like a certain level of self-awareness too, that, and discussion really is about learning about what the other person, what other people think and feel, and where they come from with their experiences, versus just, telling your story and expecting others to come around to your way of thinking. And it's, yeah.
And I've had a very up close and personal relationship in my life with a narcissist. And I would say not just oh, I'm calling them that because it's a name I'm going to call them. It's like, you know, they're likely, if they were to be diagnosed, would be diagnosed clinically as narcissist. And I bring that up to say that that relationship, again, very close relationship in my life, still to this day, has been the most frustrating, because if you know anything about narcissism, the more you point out blind spots, the more gaslighting that happens, the more projecting that happens, and the more pushback you get. So the hardest thing is to show a narcissist that they have blind spots. In this specific relationship, I don't want to say the words I've given up on them, but I realize that what they need, I'm unable to help them with. But I think that that's a low subset of people. I don't know, maybe higher than we think. But generally speaking, those kind of personalities, and I bring that up just because of, you know, the person that attended the dinner and discussion who had no concept that they were in their own world and it was all about them. Those are difficult personalities to navigate, really.
Yeah. What did you learn about, like, did you find that with your relationship with the person who you feel like might be labeled as a narcissist by a professional, did you feel like you are in a better place, like now, like that you understand, and then you're like, okay, I can reconcile this relationship better? It might not necessarily be what I want. I might not get what I want out of it, but I don't want to lose it. I have to find another way to navigate it. And have you found?
Yeah, that's really good. Great question. And that is the work I've had to do, you know, because I realize that I am in a place that I'm healthy enough to do that work. And and when I look at it that way, you know, this specific individual, I have had to say they are doing, I don't want to say the best with what they've been given, but that this may be all that I can expect from them. And then, you know, it's been 35 years this person has been in my life, and I think me getting to that realization has been important for us having any kind of relationship, and also for my mental stability, my health, and also for, and again, I have, oh my goodness, talk about projection versus self-reflection. I mean, my own journey with this individual has been, you know, I understand what's going on, but I have to do my own work. I can't expect them to fix A, B, C, D, and E. And I'm not going to live in this resentment forever. Like, I cannot live like this. Do you know what I mean? So I'm going to do my work. I'm going to make that decision because I know that this is what it is. It is what it is. You know, and I wish better for this person, of course. You know, I love this person. I want them to be better. But I realize that what I want for them, what they need, I can't give them. And we talked earlier about childhood experiences, and I know this person had a very traumatic childhood. I know that their whole life was, you know, abandonment and having to prove themselves in the world. And, you know, they grew up having to make their life all about themselves in order to survive, you know. And when I think about that, then I can take myself, you know, alien perspective. I really love that concept. I love that concept, because I think that we all need a little bit of that so that we can do our own work and pull ourselves out of, you know, what is really about us and what is not about us.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And you know what? There's two concepts that tie right into what P said, because that narcissism is their comfort configuration. Like, that's how they cope. All of us get through the day moving with our comfort configuration. Like, any movement outside of what has been enabling us to feel comfortable really hurts. So we try to stay within it. And that's the tactics we then grow up with and use. The other thing is, everybody wants to feel a level of power, just like everybody needs a level of money. The problem is, what do you want to feel powerful at? Some people want to feel power over others, and then that makes them feel powerful. I was always the person that for whatever reason, genetics or whatever, only felt powerful when I could get other people. And I think you guys can relate as physical therapists. I mean, do you feel powerful when you help other people get more powerful?
Yeah, I would say that. I
Yeah.
would agree with
Like I actually didn't like the feeling when, we would take trips to Vegas when I was in the transportation industry and have conventions out there. And, the owner of the business would, kind of treat us to like $1,000 dinners with caviar and champagne and like all this like really luxurious stuff. And I'm like, you know, I don't really need this. Like, I didn't really get off on it. Like it didn't give me a feeling of power. It actually made me feel kind of bad. Like, I'm like, why am I doing all this when I really just want the people back at the company to do better? I'm not a martyr. I'm not like trying to pump myself up. I'm just saying that I never felt good when I was getting disproportionate power or reward over other people. And so what we're trying to do at Citizen Body is teach that this misperception that you can either do good and be poor and powerless, or you can do well and be rich and powerful. We think that philosophic technology is going to show us a better balance where you can do good and well, but not to the detriment of others. And that's why we're setting this up as a benefit corporation, because it's right down the middle of a nonprofit and a business. So symbolically, we're trying to show that power drives everything, but what makes the individual feel powerful? I think in the case of our culture, we have narcissists rising up. We have the people that are most narcissistic actually becoming the leaders because they're feeding in that game. And I was in that game for 10 years. The game is to get more power and to get higher and higher up. If it was truly about helping people, think about this. I challenge people's logic. If these individuals who tell us they're in it to self-sacrifice, just like some of the great spiritual leaders have shown us, self-sacrifice is like the key. And leadership is really about self-sacrifice. But if they were really in it for 70 years in Philadelphia and for, the amount of years in Washington, the reason I say 70 is because sometimes people challenge it's one party over the other. And I proved to them that both parties actually got the same results right in Philadelphia. But if all of those people, our best and brightest, were really in it to help the way they say, would we really have our streets littered with homeless, and would we still have poverty? Or is it possible that maybe they say they're really in it to help people, but at the end of the day, they're a little bit more in it to be the king of the hill and to be powerful over others?
For sure.
See, I mean, is it really beyond us that we really can't help these people? I just don't buy that. I don't buy that, like, we don't have enough. And I don't buy that it came starting with the salaries of what they're willing to take. Like, I couldn't take $175,000 to lord over people that the median averages, I think it's 36,000. The median income for an individual household, it's like 62. And feel like I deserve that in my pension and all this for a part-time job, just because I'm so great. I don't feel that great. I feel like if I got everyone else up to 100K per household, maybe then I'd deserve it. But I certainly don't feel like I deserve it while 90% or a good 80% are living way worse than me. You know what I mean? Like, because my power comes from trying to help other people do better. And then me at the same time. Like, I don't think it's a good plan to be like, you must suffer to help other people. Like, I think we call it co-elevation, because then you have the incentive for the individual, but the incentive is the more you help other people, the better you do yourself. Right now we have, you do better yourself and other people can keep falling down. It doesn't matter. It's disconnected now. So I don't know if that ties into the gathering place, but in our discussions, this is something I would have discussed at one of your dinners piece. But that's, I'm just trying to riff and convey some of the ideas. And I think, Peace, your Facebook posts in general, I don't know if you want like more fans or followers on your social media, but feel free to plug that. We're Philadelphia based, but you know, this podcast can go anywhere. But your posts are always trying to do that elevated, I think, balanced, you know, sort of vision that we have here, you know, and that's why we wanted to have you on, because, you know, we think it starts with a small group of people, like the Margaret Mead famous quote, never underestimate the power of, you know, small committed group of citizens to change the world. And then in the citizen body starts with a couple of cells that they just keep dividing. Next thing you know, you have trillions and trillions of cells, full-blown human being. Well, if the concept starts with a few people and then just keeps spreading, and then the conversations get more like this, maybe more people feel a sense of support, community, maybe they feel the camaraderie, and then therefore the inspiration and motivation to keep it on a higher level.
Yeah. Good words, John. Good words.
Yeah.
I don't
So
know. Just
so if we're thinking about wrapping up soon, Peace, where could we find information about the Gathering Place?
You can go online. Our website is www.thegatheringplacephilly.com. And you can also follow us on Instagram at The Gathering Place Philly. And, you know, we're pretty slow with Corona, and it's been sad. My house has been empty for a long time. I mean, I have roommates, but we haven't been able to get together for events, which has been kind of sad for me. But certainly follow. We're hoping to start gatherings back up this year if things calm down. And I absolutely welcome people to my personal Facebook page. I don't do friend requests for people I haven't met, but I make a lot of my posts public. So I do have people who just follow me, even though we're not necessarily friends. So I have this fear of maxing out on my friends and then not being able to add people that I really know in real life. And that's really important to me. So yeah, so you guys can follow me. It's just Peace Ike, this face, find it. And yeah.
And I also want to point out that Peace is a musician, and you know, so follow her. I think you have some music coming up, or you've definitely done some already.
Yeah. I have a new single that was supposed to be released at the top of the year. It really speaks to where we are as a nation. But with things blowing up so much, I really want us to be in a settled place, able to reflect on it's a lyric video for a purpose. It's a lyric music video, but it's also a animated video with characters and scenes and imagery and a lot of really, really powerful shots. So I'm holding it till the dust settles, and I think maybe we're at that place now. But I do have a Valentine's Day single that I released last February, and I'll re-release that this February. So that'll be on my Facebook page. I have a personal Instagram too. You guys can follow that. It's Peace for Music, PEACE, the number 4, and then MUSIK, Peace for Music. So.
And you might even get lucky and Peace will throw in some of her beatboxing, which she also does really well.
We'll see.
Yeah. Well, it was Peace. It's been awesome having you on. I really enjoyed our discussion today. I know a lot of times I always tell John, I'm like, we got to keep it to about an hour. And he goes, no, we can go longer. And I think this was definitely a day where going longer was well worth it. So again, thank you for being with us today at the Citizen Body podcast, or the Bodycast as we call it. And we'll be talking to you guys again soon. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks,
All right,
Pete.
Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, John.
Yep.
See you.
Thanks, Sue. Thanks, Peace.
Yep.
Take care.
Yeah, you too. Yep.